Section 7 involves absolute value equations and absolute value inequalities. We're going to start off by looking at absolute value equations first. And then by the end of the section we'll work with absolute value inequalities. So we want to start off by looking at this picture here. It says Serena skates towards Darius and then passes by him. She skates at a constant speed of 20 feet per second. At what times, or it says time but then in parentheses an S, so that's time or times, is Serena 60 feet from Darius? So she's moving forward at 20 feet per second. Currently she's 100 feet away from him. How long will it take her to be 20 feet or 60 feet away from Darius? 2 seconds. In 2 seconds she goes how far? 40 feet. So then that means she has gone 40 feet. There's 60 feet remaining. So 2 seconds gets her to 60 feet away from Darius. Is that the only time she'll be 60 feet away from him if she keeps going? No? You're right. But why? Yeah. So after she passes by him, she'll keep going. And eventually she'll get to be 60 feet away from him again. So here, 60 feet away from Darius, how long does it take her to get there? If she's going at 20 feet per second, 8 seconds. So think about it. How long does it take for her to get to Darius? 5 seconds. 20 feet per second, she goes 100 feet, that's 5 seconds. But then she wants to continue going, and every second she goes another 20 feet. So that's 3 more seconds on top of that, for a total of 8 seconds. What you just did is what we call an absolute value problem. How far away from Darius is she here? How far away from him is she? 60 feet. How far away from him is she here? 60 feet. So there's 2 answers. So in this section we're going to wind up with 2 answers anytime you're dealing with an absolute value problem, because we're talking about distance away from somebody. We're talking about distance away from Darius. I can be 60 feet away from him to the left. I can be 60 feet away from him to the right. 2 different answers. And that's going to be true when we start working with equations as well. So, when you're working with absolute value equations, first of all, these bars right here, we've talked about this here. Those bars mean what? Absolute value. And absolute value is your distance away from what? How far you are away from 0. So if I want to know, like here's my number line, here's 0. If I want to know the absolute value of -3, I want to find out how far away from 0 -3 is. Well, how far away from 0 is -3? It's 3 units away. So that's why the absolute value of -3 is 3. What about if I had +3? How far away from 0 is +3? It's also 3. So the absolute value of +3 is 3. The absolute value of something is its distance from 0. Got to keep that in mind in this section. So over here I have if the absolute value of x equals 4, then what is x? X could be 4, but is there another number that's also 4 units away from 0? -4. So x could also be -4. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with absolute value. What about the absolute value of x plus 2 equals 9? Let's think about this for a second. I need something's distance from 0 plus 2 equals 9. We'll get there. 7 for sure. Is there another number that I could plug in here? -7. Okay? So you're going to have 2 answers on all these problems. We know that x equals 7 gives me the right answer. And also x equals -7 gives me the right answer. So here's how you need to do this. take this equation right here and solve for the absolute value symbol. Get the absolute value symbol by itself. Yeah. So we have absolute value of x plus 2 equals 9. Somebody said subtract 2 from both sides. Once I do that, I have the absolute value of x equals 7. And now we're looking at this right here, same type of problem. Obviously 7 works. Also negative 7 works. Alright, so here's the steps on how to solve an absolute value equation or inequality. So we're going to work with equations first. First, isolate the absolute value expression. So get the absolute value by itself. Then we're going to write case 1 and case 2. You'll see what I mean by that. Write an equivalent pair of equations or inequalities. You'll see what I mean there. And then solve each of those. So here we go. We just did this one, but let's do it again. We want to isolate the absolute value. So get the absolute value by itself, subtract 2 from both sides. And we get absolute value x equals 7. Now what we're going to do is split this into a case 1, case 2. So I'm actually going to write case 1 and case 2. Case 1 is the positive case. Everything stays exactly the way you see it. We just don't write the absolute value anymore. So instead of absolute value x, it's just x equals 7. Exactly what you saw in the first place. Case 2 is the negative case. So we're going to rewrite exactly what we have over here in the absolute value without the absolute value. So we're just going to write x equals, and now we're going to change the sign of the answer, negative 7. There's no more work to do, so that's actually our answer. But once we do this, if there was more work to do inside the absolute value, then we could continue and solve those two equations. Yeah, for the second one, we're going to go plus 5 to both sides, and then we get absolute value of n equals 3. And then we're going to write case 1, case 2. And I do want you to write those. Case 1 will be the normal case. Everything you see is exactly the same, so I'm going to write n equals 3. Case 2 is the negative case. N equals, change the sign of the answer, negative 3. And the last one, subtract 3 from both sides, and we get equals 4. And then case 1, case 2, y equals 4 for the first case, and then change the sign of the answer for the second case, y equals negative 4. Two answers on these. The key concept down at the bottom kind of summarizes that. It says to solve an equation that has absolute value in it, where a represents a variable expression and b is greater than 0. So we're just taking the absolute value of it, solve a equals b and a equals negative b. And that's what we're doing. We're going with this thing equals that, and then the same thing here, this thing equals the negative of that. So you're just changing the sign of the answer and then solving from there. Starting from 100 feet away, your friend skates towards you and then passes by you. She skates at a constant speed of 20 feet per second. Her distance d from you in feet after t seconds is given by d equals absolute value 100 minus 20t. At what times is she 40 feet from you? Well, they're telling you that her distance away is found by this equation right here. So at what times is she 40 feet from you? Well, 40 feet is a distance. So I'm going to take that 40 feet and substitute it in right there for d. So I write 40 equals absolute value 100 minus 20t. That's kind of a weird order. We like to have the equal sign on the other side, so I could rewrite that if I wanted to. Now I have absolute value 100 minus 20t equals 40. Remember that our goal is to get the absolute value part by itself. Is absolute value by itself on one side right now? Yes. So we can split into case 1 and case 2 right now. Case 1, case 2. Case 1 will be the absolute value stuff. Nothing changes. 100 minus 20t equals, keep the answer the same, 40. For case 2, inside the absolute value stuff, again, nothing changes. 100 minus 20t equals, now this time we change the sign of the answer and it will become negative 40. So what's inside the absolute value stays the same. It does not change. You only change the sign of the answer. Okay, so now we just need to solve these two equations. To solve this equation, we're going to subtract 100 from both sides. And that gives me negative 20t equals negative 60. Then divide by negative 20 to both sides. And we get t equals 3 seconds. So there's my first one. Now for my second one, I'm going to solve by what? Subtract 100 from both sides. And I get negative 20t equals negative 140. Divide both sides by negative 20. 7 seconds. So we get 3 seconds and 7 seconds after time starts. Our friend will be 40 feet away from us. Okay? Now this happens to be multiple choice, so what's the correct answer? C. So I'd fill in C. Or if this was one of our tests, we'd write C over there.